Hello there, I'm Ruth Allen. I'm the Chief Executive of BASWA. Really pleased that you're joining us for this webinar this evening. And our subject is BASWA's Advice and Representation Service and the work of the Social Workers Union. And I'm delighted to be joined this evening by members of BASWA's Advice and Representation Service. And I'm going to start by asking them to introduce themselves. So, Lian, can I turn to you first?
I'm Lian Watts and I'm the head of BASWA's Advice and Representation Service. I'm also the Assistant General Secretary of the Social Workers Union, SWU.
Thanks, Lian. Lise, can I turn to you? That's right. Can I turn to you next, Lise? Hi.
Hi, I'm Lise Hurd and I represent the A&R service in north of London area and then also London.
Great. Julie, can I come to you next? Turn your microphone on.
Hello, my name's Julie Long and I'm an A&R officer and a trade union official for the Social Workers Union.
Brilliant, thank you. And Laura, can I come to you?
Hello, I'm Laura Sheridan. I am an A&R officer and trade union official for the Social Workers Union, and I'm based in the Midlands.
Thanks very much. So you're mainly going to be hearing from my colleagues. My role this evening is to kind of host and field some questions. You will have the opportunity in the audience to put forward questions and have some of those answered in the second part of today's presentation. I'd like to draw your attention to the white box, which is probably in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if it isn't, look for a little orange box with a white arrow in it. And if you click on it, that box should open up and that allows you to put your questions into the chat box. So please do send in questions and comments throughout the session because that will allow us to have a really good discussion in the second part of tonight's webinar. So the running order is there are going to be some slides and presentations from my four colleagues before we get on to that. We won't be able to answer any personal questions. I'm sure you completely understand that. If you do have any issues that you want to raise with the A&R team and you are a member of BASWA, if you're a member of SWU as well, you can have SWU services too, then obviously please do get in touch. And I think throughout the presentation, you'll be hearing some of the information about how to get in touch by telephone and also by email. You have handouts of the presentation. If you look again on your chat screen, the little white box, it should say that there are handouts available. All of this will be available online afterwards as well. So the webinar is being recorded. You can get it on the BASWA website, and you'll also be able to get the handouts from there as well. So with that, I think we're probably ready to go. So I'd like to start first by turning again to Lian, who's the head of service and who will start with her presentation about what she does in the A&R service. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as I said, I head up the Advice and Representation Service, fondly known as A&R service, and also the AGS of SWU. I'm now the longest serving member of the A&R team, having myself worked as an officer prior to moving into the management of the team. An A&R service of sorts was set up very early in BASWA's history when it was realised that social workers going through personal and professional difficulties needed advice and support. It was a small but very important part of BASWA's overall package, membership package, and it still is. It was originally a very small team with just one or two people handling inquiries, and then it started to grow, took on admin support, and by the time I joined, we were a team of 8 full-time, part-time and full-time officers, including a service manager and 1 senior officer. We now have 15 officers, including 2 senior officers, plus myself overseeing the operation. And it's been a really exciting journey so far. Can you change the slide, please, Steph? Thank you. So we're all employed by BASWA, but the A&R team undertakes work on behalf of the Social Workers Union, which is a specialist trade union just for social workers, and was set up by BASWA in June 2011. SWU is a certified and independent trade union with its own governance through its elected members, including the General Secretary, John McGowan. And SWU has become the fastest growing trade union in the UK, and I think throughout Europe. Some people are very confused about the relationship between BASWA and SWU, but it's important to stress that we are two separate organisations who happen to work collaboratively together. The A&R team is the main link between BASWA and SWU, and we feed back issues and concerns, and for example, any themes that we identify to both BASWA Council and to the SWU Executive. This ensures that the leadership of both organisations are able to work together strategically on some of their messaging relating to the issues which we raise. A good example of this was the research into working conditions of social workers conducted by Bath University for BASWA and SWU, which I was able to feed into, giving examples of situations reported to our service by our members. The other presenters here today will elaborate a little more on why you should join both organisations, and we can answer further questions about it later too, if you have any. All our officers are qualified and registered social workers, independent of our members' employers. Those are our unique selling points. And collectively, the team has experience again across all of the social work disciplines. Many of them have achieved very senior positions during their social work careers and have an interest and experience in and developed great experience in employment law. Some have formal legal and management qualifications in addition to their social work qualifications. I am very privileged to be able to lead such a talented and skilled group of people, and would have no difficulty in recommending any of them to you should you ever need support in employment or regulatory body matters. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by just three of my colleagues, Lise Hurd, Julie Long and Laura Sheridan, who will talk a little bit more about what they and the rest of the team do in a moment. As Ruth said, we will welcome general questions after this presentation, but if there are any questions that we don't get to, or you feel you don't want to share in this space, you can call into our duty service on 0121 622 8413 to ask for an appointment with one of our officers. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to the first of the team presenters, and that's Laura Sheridan. Laura, over to you.
Thank you, Leanne. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'm going to talk a bit about who we are and what we do. Our team are a group of representatives. We cover the whole of the UK. We've got individual A&R officers covering specific UK regions. I cover the Midlands area. As officers, we all work from home and we travel around our individual regions to provide representation for members. We carry out representation as BASWA representatives and also work as trade union officials on behalf of the Social Workers Union. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Leanne's already explained the partnership between BASWA and SWU, so I won't repeat this. However, I felt it would be important to highlight to members at this point that membership of the Social Workers Union is an extra £25 yearly on top of your BASWA membership. The benefit of being with SWU is that legally, officers of a certified trade union, such as SWU, can't be refused access to provide representation at disciplinary and grievance procedures. We therefore advise that members add this SWU membership to their existing BASWA membership if they don't have it already, just to provide that extra security. You can do this by contacting membership team on 0121 622 8401. Can we have the next slide, please? So, what is the role of the A&R team and the A&R officers on a usual basis? Our team, we provide advice and representation with employment issues. The key point of contact for our service is via our duty system, where members can ring and book an initial telephone appointment for advice on employment issues with one of our officers. Depending on what the issue is, sometimes advice is all that's needed. Sometimes a member may require considering for allocation to an officer for some ongoing representation with their issue. Members are eligible for representation in formal proceedings if they've been a BASWA or SWU member for over 3 months and the issue wasn't a pre-existing issue or one that's occurred within that first 3 months of membership. All members can ring for advice from our team from the day of joining. The bulk of the work that our team carries out is providing advice and representation in formal proceedings such as sickness proceedings, grievance and disciplinary proceedings, formal capability processes, probationary period meetings where there's a potential risk that someone's probation may be ended or extended. And we also represent at regulatory body proceedings. We provide advice to members on their employment rights, what to expect at meetings. We advise on how to formulate statements for the processes and what evidence to submit. We also represent members in formal hearings. Could we go on to the next slide, please? So, how has our work changed during the COVID-19 situation? It's important to stress that we are very much still here to provide advice and representation to all of our members. We're experienced social workers, we do know employment law, and we want to provide advice and representation to social workers through this time of crisis to ensure that your working conditions are as safe as they can be. All of our work is now being carried out remotely, and both myself and my colleagues have attended meetings via telephone conference and video link on a regular basis throughout this situation. There's been a change in the way we've worked to a degree in terms of the things we've seen coming in. So initially what I was seeing in some of my the members and the things that people that I've been representing is that grievances and disciplinary processes were slowed down and put on hold as employers understandably prioritise their response to COVID-19. What I'm now starting to see is that things are starting to be picked up again, albeit things are being done at a slower pace than they were previously. One of the biggest issues my colleagues and I saw initially was employers struggling with the concept of working at home. Existing members that I've been representing with other issues were in contact with me reporting things like they were being told they needed to be going into work because there was a presence needed in the office. Myself and my colleagues have advised members on this issue, and in conjunction with the SWU General Secretary, we have supported members by sending out letters to employers outlining their duties towards staff in these situations and reminding them of the clear government guidance that states if staff can work from home, they should work from home. COVID-19 or not, the bottom line is that employers still have a duty of care towards staff. They have to maintain the health and safety of their staff and provide a safe system of work. We're getting less of the calls around working from home now, as I think most employers have got their heads around staff working from home. However, it will be interesting to see how this changes as the weeks progress and as the government guidance varies. Another particular issue that our team have offered support with is the emerging and hugely concerning evidence that people from Black, Asian and ethnic minority groups have suffered more deaths as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. We've recently provided representation for a member from an ethnic minority group with a particular COVID-related issue, and we highlighted the fact that there's emerging evidence that people from this particular group appear to be more at risk from the virus with the member's employer. Shortly after our correspondence, the employer promptly notified staff that their policy moving forwards would be to consider all people from BAME groups as vulnerable and would be encouraging managers to have the same conversations with their BAME staff as they would be with all staff members in the vulnerable group, along with putting in place a host of measures to help minimise the risks to this staff group. It is difficult to predict how things will progress as time goes on and we come out of lockdown. We all know that there's been a lot of government guidance throughout this situation and that it's changed on a very regular basis. Indeed, as I'm speaking today, I think our entire nation is still trying to get to grips with the latest guidance that's been issued and the differences in approach that our 4 nations are taking. One thing that our team have been doing is keeping track of the government guidance and saving it in a folder as it's released. This is in case it's needed further down the line. For example, if we've got a worker who's been advised to go against the government guidance, who then is facing any sort of disciplinary action as a result of this, we can use this folder and refer to this with the guidance and refer to the guidance as we need to and use it as evidence to support that member's case. I'll now pass you back to the chair.
Thanks very much, Laura. Hopefully that will perhaps stimulate some more questions from the audience as well, as you're talking about the particular situation that we're dealing with in terms of COVID. And I know the team's been working really, really hard to respond really strongly and really effectively for our members in that. And as you say, to keep up to date with all of the changes that are occurring and the situations that members are finding themselves in. Can I now turn to Julie, who I think is going to be talking more about the regulatory side. Julie?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to explain how the Advice and Representation Service provides support to our members who have been referred to their regulatory bodies. This includes the Northern Ireland Social Care Council, the Scottish Social Services Council, or the SSC as it's more commonly known, Social Work England and Social Care Wales. Next slide, please. The aim of the regulatory bodies is to ensure that all social workers in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales have the right skills and qualifications to work to high professional standards, and that they are capable of delivering high quality services that the public, including service users and their carers, have confidence in. It's worth mentioning that all the regulators have produced a plethora of information about the coronavirus pandemic and regularly update their websites. So it's definitely worth visiting those websites if you have a particular question for one of those regulatory bodies. Most referrals to regulatory bodies come from patients or service users, followed by referrals made by employers or former employers or the police. All the regulators' primary function is protection of the public, and they fulfil this by setting and publishing standards of proficiency, as well as standards of conduct, performance, and ethics, and by considering complaints against registrants. Can I have the next slide, please? In their fitness to practice function, the regulators adopt the test that a registrant's fitness to practice is impaired. Impairment can be alleged on the grounds of misconduct, lack of competence, physical or mental health, criminal conviction or caution, or a determination of impairment by another health or social care regulator. The process followed by the regulators involves complaints from whatever source being initially investigated. The investigators consider it as a written complaint and any written response from the registrant, whether there is a case to answer. If there is, the case is referred to the appropriate committee. After investigation, which can take many months and in some cases years, a panel of the regulatory committee will be convened to hear the case. Once a hearing is convened, the regulatory bodies will instruct a solicitor or barrister to present their case. The registrant is entitled to secure legal representation. The cost of such representation can be costly and can go into several thousands of pounds. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, officers from our A&R service support and represent members through initial referral through to fitness to practice hearings. This is where we differ slightly from the Social Workers Union in that the support for regulatory bodies is all through the Advice and Representation Service. The support commences from the time the registrant is required to provide an initial response to the allegations. We encourage our members to contact us when they're required to respond to their regulator. It can be helpful to discuss your response with an A&R officer through our duty system. Currently, The A&R service operates a daily duty service consisting of 10 appointments a day to provide advice and support to our members. The A&R service have also produced a number of fact sheets which contain helpful advice about how to respond to a complaint. Your initial response is important to ensure that the investigators have all the information they require to ascertain if any case has a realistic prospect of success if the evidence was to be tested at a hearing. I, along with my A&R colleagues, support and represent many members in fitness to practice hearings. These include a member who had completed a social work course. However, due to a previous criminal caution, she was refused entry onto the regulator's register. Following a hearing, the member was allowed on the register. I've also supported a member referred by a former employer for crossing professional boundaries outside of the workplace. This member, in addition to her social work role, worked as a volunteer in a mental health unit at the weekends. In their volunteer capacity, this member took a resident out for the day in their own time. At the fitness to practice hearing, the member was able to demonstrate remediation, and therefore there was no case to answer. We at the A&R service received many calls to our duty service from members who have posted photographs and personal information on social media and have been disciplined by their employers and the regulators. We advise members to be extremely careful about what they post on social media. Although many argue that their account is private, we would advise never to post a comment or a photograph on social media that you wouldn't be content for your employer or regulator to approve of. I've represented social workers who have made genuine mistakes during the course of their work for a variety of reasons. We encourage our members to accept the mistake and to provide mitigation following this. The fitness to practice process is not necessarily about addressing the allegations, but how you respond to those allegations. If mistakes have been made, it's important to recognise the error, express remorse for that error, reflect on that error, and remediate the error by undertaking training or undergoing counselling to try to minimise the risk of repeating the error. Next slide, please. The fitness to practice means being competent, respectable, honest and trustworthy, and means being able to work with service users and others and be in sufficiently good health to practice. The A&R officers represent at hearings and will assist members to prepare their statement of case prior to the hearing. The registrant is not required to give live evidence, but we try to encourage our members to do this, as this allows the panel to observe the registrant's demeanour and provide the panel with an opportunity to ask the registrant's questions to provide clarity. At the final hearings, the regulators have a range of sanctions open to them. These can range from a caution, conditions of practice, suspension from the register, or a striking off order. Please make an appointment with the A&R office by telephone or duty line on 0121 622 8413 if you have a question to ask about regulatory bodies. Thank you very much. I'll now hand you back to our chair, Liam Ross.
Hi, Julie. I think it's coming back to me. But thanks very much. And you really brought it to life with those examples.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's important to hear that this amazing team, the A&R team, which is an amazing team, works day in, day out with really supporting the professional lives of so many members. You have many successes in fighting people's corner quite appropriately for a fair hearing at work, and also helping people to accept when they need to maybe make some changes, which I think is also bound by our code of ethics as social workers, as well as providing support, which I know is very important to you as a team and very important to us as BASWA as an organisation. So thanks, Julie. Can I turn now to Lise, and we're going to hear from her now. Thanks, Lise.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lise Hurd, and I'm one of the SWU A&R reps, and I am based north of London. Today, I'm going to talk to you about our duty system and how it's changed lately, and then give you some examples of some themes we've seen in relation to coronavirus. I'll then discuss some concerns we've had going forward and our advice about those concerns. We've had an increase in calls to our duty system at the beginning of the lockdown, mostly dealing with the coronavirus, but this does seem to be waning now. Guidance has been published by the government regarding working from home, sickness absence, carrying over leave, etc. And the government has added temporary benefits to cover those unable to draw an income. So we've had to understand how the guidance impacts on our members. Most of our members are still working in some capacity, however, but where we are finding issues is with the locum social workers and also around the issue of furloughing. So I will discuss those later. Next slide, please. So what are some of the themes that we're seeing now that the virus is in full force? We've had a number of themes that have stood out to us in the A&R service. Some of these are as a result of employers not understanding how they can make their services work. So there have been teething issues. However, with some of the issues we've heard about, it is difficult to find justification for some of the employer's actions. For instance, some social workers are being made to attend offices or to do visits without reasons that adhere to government guidance or without a proper risk assessment. Some of the reasons given range from not being able to secure devices such as laptops, desktops, if they allow the person to work from home, to the misunderstanding that there must be a presence in the office. So whilst we accept that there are data protection issues to consider for home working, the Information Commissioner's Office advice is that data protection is not a barrier to home working. The employers, therefore, need to provide the appropriate advice to their staff about using this equipment in their homes rather than stopping them from home working altogether. Having a presence in the office should be assessed as to why this presence is needed. There should be risk assessments done on all staff regarding home visits and attending facilities or working in the office. Some members are still being forced into situations where there's no PPE or inadequate PPE. They're having to apply for the PPE and are often rejected, being told that their situation doesn't meet the criteria. Employers need to ensure that there is a clear plan in place for risk assessing visits and providing appropriate PPE where it's determined that this is needed. Another issue that we're seeing is that carers are struggling to provide care duties as well as performing their substantive duties. Your caring responsibilities don't end just because you're working. Parents may be struggling with kids at home who need their attention, or those caring for elderly relatives may find that they have extra responsibilities as a result. This can be distracting and cause problems with making phone calls, attending meetings, etc. So if you find yourself in this position, you can ask your employer to furlough you. However, they are under no obligation to do so, and any organization that gets its staff expenses from government funding will be expected to pay those salaries in full with the money that they are already provided. The expectation, therefore, is that government-funded employers do not furlough as a general rule. So if this does become a problem, it's worth trying to maybe negotiate some flexibility in your working arrangements. And we can also assist with those negotiations if it becomes necessary. One of our larger areas of concern is in relation to Irs 35 and umbrella companies' roles during the pandemic. This has been rather uncertain for members. We've been asked questions as to whether umbrella companies are required to furlough. They're not under any obligation to furlough you and will be unlikely to furlough you because the admin costs on them would mean that they're losing money by furloughing the people that they're paying. We can look at your individual situation and offer advice. Some umbrella companies are furloughing, so it is worth asking yours. Another issue that has arisen and may become a problem as time progresses is that members are potentially being redeployed or asked to do alternate roles without any kind of training, even when the lockdown ends. People could be finding themselves redeployed elsewhere in order to make up for some staff shortages. This isn't a problem per se, but could lead to problems if it's not managed correctly. You must be provided with adequate training in that area and be provided with any PPE that is necessary for that role. Next slide, please. BASWA and the Social Workers Union has also become concerned about the disproportionate impact that this virus seems to be having on our BAME colleagues in both the health and social care sector. Despite making up 14% of the population, 35% of intensive care patients with COVID-19 are BAME. Similar disproportionate infection rates exist within the staff group of the NHS and social care. There have been many theories posed about this, but until there is an official inquiry, which I understand is planned by the government, we won't know for sure why this is. Therefore, it's imperative that employers protect our BAME social work colleagues in a similar manner as the NHS has committed to do. Next slide, please. When the lockdown ends, we anticipate that many of you will have continuing concerns about returning to the office. The current advice is that where you can work from home, even after the lockdown ends, the government will be expecting you to do so. This means that your employers should be continuing with current practices of home working, unless there is a good reason not to. I expect that the largest impact at the end of the lockdown, and even in this uncertain time that we're in right now, in between the end of the lockdown and the start of the lockdown, will be in relation to your service user contacts. We wouldn't expect employers to just start moving you back into the office at this moment in time, just because of the announcements yesterday and today. However, there are bound to be moves towards more service user contact, which most of you will probably welcome. However, risk assessments are vital here. Next slide, please. If these or any other issues, whether they are coronavirus related or not, become a focus for you and you are a member of BASWA and or SWU, please phone our duty line so that we can provide you with the bespoke service and advice about your particular situation. And you'll see those numbers in the website posted there. If you are currently not a member of BASWA or SWU, you can ring the membership number or you can join online today. If you're not a member of SWU, but are a member of BASWA, then you can ring membership to top up your membership to SWU as well. It's only £25 a year top up, and you will be entitled to all the perks of union membership that were mentioned earlier. Members are able to ring our advice and representation contact number, which is posted, where one of our admin team will arrange to provide you with any relevant guidance sheets to you, and then book you a telephone appointment with one of our A&R officers. You can also access the duty service online. If you get the answer phone when you ring in, please, please, please leave a message, because we will phone you back so that we can make an appointment with you. Please also check our SWU newsletter, and as well check our PSW A&R section, as we are constantly putting new advice and assistance in there as well. And that's all I have, and I will turn back over to the chair. Thank you.
Please, thank you. That was great. Thank you, all of you, as a really clear description of the work that you do, and brought to life, as I said, by some examples there, and also some of the particular pressures that we know social workers are facing at the moment. I've got some questions coming in, and so if it's okay with all of you, I'm going to fire a few at you and see which ones you'd like to pick up. There's a question here about if I have a professional problem with colleagues or with other agencies that's not a formal employment law matter, can the Advice and Representation Service do anything for me? There's a question there. Would anybody like to pick that one up? Please, yeah, sure.
Yes, we are more than happy to help you deal with any kind of informal issues that you might have. If you want to completely keep it informal, there are things that we can do to support you. We can either help you to formulate a way that helps you to approach your manager, or if you're having an issue with a colleague at work, we can make recommendations about mediation, that sort of thing. The other thing that we can do is, if you decide, you know, no, I've tried informal, I now need to make that formal. We have guidance sheets that we can provide you. Particularly, I'm thinking about bullying and harassment in this particular instance, and then also guidance sheets on filing a formal grievance. So either one of those options would be a perfectly acceptable option for us to help you deal with that. And if you're not, if you aren't within your qualifying period, so if you haven't been a member for 3 months and you're not eligible for representation, we can still assist you, because you can call the duty service and get advice and assistance through our duty service, as well as the guidance sheets that we're able to provide.
Thanks, Lisa. That's really important. Some really important messages there about the general advice. And do you think it would be fair to say, Leon, I think you had your hand up, so I'll come to you. Do you think it would be fair to say that we would like people to get in touch earlier in any difficulties they have, rather than wait and suffer and things kind of get perhaps more pear-shaped? I know things can go quickly sometimes, and sometimes you can't do much about it. But sometimes, you know, if you called up earlier and maybe got some advice. Leon, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that and say that, you know, we generally advise people to try and deal with issues like that informally first anyway. Obviously, if it, as Lisa says, if it becomes more of a challenge, then we can help and guide through formal processes as well. But the thing I wanted to pick up on was, I think the questioner asked about professional problems with colleagues or other agencies. And that's a bit more tricky if they're having difficulties with external agencies. So nothing to do with their particular employment, but other agencies. And there would be processes in place to make complaints against other agencies. I mean, clearly, if there are serious complaints and the people that you're concerned about in those other agencies are also social workers, then of course they will be bound by their regulatory body as well. So that's a route to take. But I think what we would be keen to stress in any of these sorts of situations is, you know, try and deal with it informally, because it's just so much better. Once you start going down the formal route, it just ups the ante, I suppose, and makes it more of a challenge. As we've said, if you want to go down that route, fine, we will support you to do that. But do try and exhaust all the other avenues first.
Thanks, Leon. There's a comment here about social media, which I think it's possibly Julie you mentioned. It's certainly been mentioned already. About social workers using social media, for instance, where social workers might be looking, I think what's meant by this is carrying out safeguarding investigations, I guess, where people look at the social media of families, of young people, or of parents. And maybe feel that that there's a question mark over whether that's appropriate. Is that are those sorts of things can come? Yeah, great. Laura, do you want to pick up on that? That would be great.
I'll just unmute myself. Yeah, sorry, it's the issue around kind of using social media is it's about balancing that the confidentiality in the person's right to a private life with interfering with looking at their social media page. Now, it could be argued that if you're posting something on social media and you haven't got your privacy settings on, it's out there for everybody anyway. But one of the things, and I've literally just picked up on Social Work England's standards guidance, and I'm not able to go through all of the regulatory bodies' guidance at the moment, obviously with it being a question on the spot. But there's quite clear guidance in their standards in terms of, actually, if a social worker is conducting a search online, they need to think about whether they'd be breaching privacy laws, and actually sometimes searching for information in the course of social work is justifiable, such as in an emergency. But what is really important, and this would be the same guidance from any regulatory body, and I think any social work professional, is you need to be able to justify your actions. So if you have genuine safeguarding, serious, urgent safeguarding concerns about a child, then you need to record why you've been, going through someone's social media to check out what's going on. And I think it is about providing that justification for your actions, really. And I think, without having details about any individual case. I couldn't advise on anything individual, but it is about being able to justify why you've gone down that route.
Yeah, I think we know through the COVID crisis, more social workers have had to work online, haven't they, in a whole variety of ways. So I don't know if that's come through with any queries to you. Has anything come through ANR about people being asked to work online more?
Yes, we have, and we've got lots of examples of people not quite getting used to the process yet, and getting into a bit of difficulty because they're not used to working in that way. So I think we're going to update the guidance, but I was going to say that BASWA has produced guidance anyway for working with social media, but it's just become so much more commonplace, and it seems to be working reasonably well. I said at the beginning I was a child protection social worker, and I find myself wondering how on earth you could possibly do a child protection, assessment or a family assessment via social media. I think that could be fraught with risks, but at the moment that's, we're having to do the best we can. And some social workers and some authorities have been quite creative and quite open-minded, open to using social media in the best way they possibly can. And it can work, I think.
Thank you. Yes, we have digital capabilities guidance, which BASWA produced with Social Care Institute for Excellence and other partners, which you can find on the BASWA website. And there's a webinar as well where we do relate it to the COVID situation. But I guess being confident that you're doing the right thing online is something that social workers increasingly need advice and reassurance about. And it's the sort of thing that BASWA will continue to keep developing because it is so important. I've got a question here, another question. If I go to a different topic, is that okay? A question: can ANR speak to an employer without naming the social worker involved? So is that something we can ever do? Who's going to fight for it?
Do you want to fight for it?
Laura, you have a go.
I mean, I was just going to say that, we have written letters to employers in the past. We don't necessarily have to mention the social worker, but what we can't do, and I will be corrected on this if someone wants to correct me on this, but I would feel uncomfortable writing to an employer saying, I know you have a person who is experiencing this specific issue, and we need you to stop doing that. If you and your colleagues have a concern, and we've done this with the coronavirus issue, then we are able to write to the employer and say, we are concerned because we understand this is happening in your organization. But we would have to look at that on an individual basis to see if that particular issue is appropriate for that, because your issue may be one that you might not have a choice but to raise, them knowing who you are.
Thanks, Lise. And that's another example of where we can pick up on themes and actually potentially go to an employer where we might get a number of queries. Yes, Leon, do you want to pick up on that?
Yes, indeed. We do collate themes where we can, as best we can, and that not only means that perhaps we're finding that, for example, the BAME members calling in and saying they've got particular issues, but if, for example, we have a number of calls through about or from a particular employer, or employees from a particular employer or a local authority or whatever, and we start to think, hang on a minute, that's the third one we've had this week about this employer, then we discuss things as a team and talk about what we might do about it. And we have sometimes written to employers, often with, for example, John McGowan's help, where we've written to employers and said, you know, we're getting a bit concerned because we've heard from a number of our members that such and such is happening, something is happening. And that works quite well. So we can do it that way. But clearly, if it's an individual problem, then we really do need to be able to deal with it properly, openly and transparently. If the member absolutely doesn't want us to raise it in that way, then we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do, you know, we wouldn't go against our members' express wishes.
Thank you. There's a question here actually about the fact that we don't apparently have a lot of ethnic diversity on our panel today, which I think is an absolutely fair point. And although obviously you can't always tell diversity from just from looking, but I think it's a very fair point. And we do know it's particularly black members of our profession who have a particularly difficult time, and we see that coming through our ANR referrals actually, and in outcomes or the ways that employers behave. We're really conscious of it, and I will just make this say it's a totally fair point and say that the work we're doing at the moment around diversity inclusion, our new diversity inclusion group, which is being led by a number of black members, but that diversity is actually about all diversities. But that's so that piece of work is incredibly important to us. So actually really welcome that observation and completely take it on board, and we will be looking for more diversity within BASWA over the coming time as well. So I'm going to try and pick up on a few more slightly different topics, if that's okay. I will pick up on, sorry, I'm just scrolling through here. There's a question about do we ever represent managers and more senior members of staff? So who are the people who come forward? What sort of positions are they in? Leon, do you want to pick up on that?
Do, unless one of my colleagues wants to answer it. No, Julie? No. Okay. Well, yes is the short answer. We act for any our members, and they span the whole range of positions, from you know, student members who are having challenges in placements, for example, right the way through to heads of service, directors of social services, anybody in the social work profession. So yeah, and I think we can probably all say we have represented people from across the whole spectrum as well. Does anybody want to add anything else to that? Anything specific, Lise? Yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, it's something else that we have done both on our duty system, or if it becomes more of a serious issue or an issue of the manager not being treated fairly, is that if a manager's had a grievance filed against them, we can provide support, we can provide advice, and in some instances we have provided representation in respect of those. So we would definitely encourage you to call us if you find yourself you know, the subject of a grievance or a complaint.
Leon?
Yes, one more thing. I was going to say about bullying that it's not just downwards bullying. There is such a thing as upwards bullying, and never mind what position you're in, you might be bullied by somebody who is you know, one of your line reports or further down in the organisation, and that is just as serious, and we have dealt with that sort of thing as well.
Thank you. I think it's one of the things that always strikes me is that all of our staff in ANR have a lot of experience in all sorts of different roles, and we do, and the fact that we can we do try to really understand the context in which these things are happening and try to get to a resolution that really protects people's rights, but also kind of protects the kind of humanity and sort of finds a solution and a best way forward rather than getting stuck in loggerheads. And I think that's a really important, that using social work skills to do that whilst upholding people's rights, employment rights, and so on. I've got a question here that I think is something that's come through quite a few times through this COVID situation, as I understand it from what you told me about referrals. As an agency worker, I feel I'm being treated differently to permanent staff. For instance, asked to work more outside of my home than some of my colleagues. What can you do about that? Laura, do you want to pick up on that one? Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that's one that you're saying has come up as a frequently asked question, because it is something that we have dealt with, and I know Lise, touched on it earlier. We have been quite appalled with some of the calls we've had coming through from agency workers that are also being used as human shields. We're not going to send our permanent staff out, we'll use the temporary ones to do the work that isn't safe for our permanent staff to do. And that's just, if it's not safe for staff to be going out to situations, then they shouldn't be going out, regardless of whether you're a permanent employee within a local authority or an agency employee within a local authority. So, and it's about how we represent and support people through that. I mean, the bottom line is, as I said earlier, the employer, regardless whether it's the agency or the end user, as in the local authority, has a duty of care towards staff and has a duty of care towards maintaining the safety of staff. And that doesn't go away. It hasn't gone away since this COVID-19 crisis. In fact, it's got more important. And I think what I would urge people to do in that situation is, if you're having that particular issue, please ring and talk to us so we can talk you through about what your options are and speak to you about your actual individual situation, so we can offer the right support, because it is something that concerns us if agency staff are being put in situations that are unsafe when that really shouldn't be happening.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It might be a bit linked, but also I think it covers slightly different groups of members. Actually, is independent members. I mean, what I've got a question here about what can we do for independent members? What sorts of services do we offer there? Julie, would you like to pick that one up?
Yeah, the services that we can offer for independent workers are they've had full cover if they're referred to any of the regulatory bodies, and that's, as I say, that's right, through to full representation for them, with their regulatory bodies. I recently represented an agency worker, or a locum worker who had applied for a job via an agency, and she was discriminated against, and we went through ACAS and she actually got £5,000 in compensation. I've also worked with locum staff who have not had any, who have not received payment from local authorities. We've took them to our solicitors, and our solicitors have gone through to the tribunals and managed to get substantial settlement agreements for those agency workers. So although obviously I'm talking about agency workers and independents as well, really, but independents, that is what we can mainly offer them. Thank you.
Julie, thanks. Thank you. Liam, did you want to come in?
One of the things I was going to talk about was that agency workers and independent social workers often see things and that they're not happy about and will blow the whistle. Now, that puts them into a difficult position because, because they're agency staff or whatever, they're quite easy to shuffle along. But we have represented agency workers who have blown the whistle, and in fact our solicitors picked those cases up, and we again managed to get things changed in those employers' systems and procedures that overcame the original problem, and as it happens, the agency worker was compensated for her trouble, which was very important because she was out of work for some time as a consequence. But there are things that are employment law related, even if you're not directly employed by your the end user. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. And we've had a couple of questions through about IR35 and umbrella companies, which is a terminology that is probably very familiar to some people down the line and might not be familiar to others. Does anybody feel able just to give a very quick description of what IR35 and umbrella companies is? I think, Liz, you mentioned that in your presentation, and I will say that all information on this is in our FAQs, but can anybody give a kind of 30-second explanation of what IR35 and umbrella companies are?
30 seconds. IR35, for those of you who know, a lot of agency employees now, so agency social workers fall under that. It's the IR is Internal Revenue, and basically it's the government's way of kind of clawing back from the people who had limited companies before. So now what a lot of them are doing, instead of keeping those limited companies because it's more costly to keep the limited company, rather than going through an umbrella company and being paid their wages through the umbrella company, and some of them are having some issues with the umbrella companies. So what we're encouraging you to do is to please ring us if you are an agency worker and you are under an umbrella company, and that's how you're getting your wages. If you have issues either with the umbrella company, either not getting wages, not getting pay slips, not getting the money to where it needs to be, call us. If you're getting ready to sign up with an umbrella company and you think it may be too good to be true, give us a call. We may be able to, advise you. Generally, if it does sound too good to be true, though, it generally is. So I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Yeah. One of the things that we found have been happening probably last year more than this year was some umbrella companies were in the contract. They would pay the minimum wage, and the rest of the salary would be paid via a loan or something like that. And quite frankly, they caused all sorts of problems at the time. And we had to sort out lots of difficulties, and a number of independent social workers sadly lost quite a lot of money as a result of that. Now, fast forward to today, and the issues there is for agency workers, if they are furloughed, then but their contract has only paid them the minimum wage, then they will only get 80% of their minimum wage, not 80% of their normal wage, because the rest of it is seen as a loan repayment. So it's well worth, if you are with an umbrella company or thinking of going with an umbrella company, as Lise says, it's well worth looking very carefully at the contract. And you can call us, and we can, we're not contract law specialists, but there are certain things we can check out for you. And we also have access to a very, very good firm of solicitors who will advise us on that sort of thing as well, as best they can.
Thank you, Liam. Just conscious the time has caught up with us. Thank you for that. We were in some quite difficult technical territory then, and I think one of the key things about the ANR service and the SWU service is that we can deal with really complicated social work type situations, sorts of things that our listeners and viewers today are dealing with every day, because you, BASWA, and you as the ANR team really understand the context in which social workers are trying to work. We're obviously here for you all the time. We are particularly here for you in a particular way throughout the COVID situation, and we are responding and developing our service in response to this very difficult time that we know that many people are in at work as well as at home, and often where the two things perhaps clash. So we're very, very conscious of that, and we're keeping up to date. all of our officers, all 15 of them. You've just got a few of them here. They are a very diverse bunch. You've got these the lovely people that you've had today. They are social workers. You know, we're providing a service for social workers, by people who are incredibly experienced and well trained as your representatives as well, both in employment and regulatory matters. And I hope that's come over. A couple of quick messages perhaps from today. Get in touch if you're unsure about whether your matter, the thing that's concerning you, is relevant. Get in touch. We'd like to hear from you earlier rather than later in a problem, because there's lots that we can do to help you solve it. And also please check our FAQs, our frequently asked questions guides that are on the website, which are there, and we will keep updating them and keep adding things in there. And I am just scrolling up to find a very nice comment. Somebody rang ANR, one of our listeners, viewers, rang ANR last week, was very grateful for the support from a SWU professional and a BASWA professional who was brilliant, according to the person who put that in the chat box. So we hope that everybody who contacts ANR has a brilliant service. We hope that we can provide you with what you need, sometimes in very difficult circumstances. We hope that we will always do the very best for you. So thank you to Leon, Lise, Julie, Laura, and thank you for those of you in the audience for joining us this evening. This webinar will be available for you afterwards, and please let your colleagues know that it's there in case they want to find out more about BASWA's ANR service and about Social Workers Union. Thank you very much and good evening.